Allez. Excellent. So, good afternoon to you. We are back today for the third time on this issue, access to sea and water activities, how and for who. This means that there is two aspects to access to the water activities. When we talk about water activities, we mean sea activities, we mean rivers, we mean lake. You may know that in the outdoors there are different subsectors, earth, snow, etc. And water activities is one of them. My name is Jean-Yves Lapeyrère, I'm French, and I happen to be the president of the European Confederation of Outdoor Employers. We are a European organization with representation in different member states, and we represent companies, not sporting clubs or these sort of things, mainly and exclusively actually self-employed or companies that deliver service in the outdoors, in kayak, in skiing, in climbing, in all the activities of the outdoors. And of course, today we will be talking mainly about water activities because that's your topic, that's your job, that's your profession. You are the pros in river activities. There are, in rivers like in many other outdoor activities, there are two aspects. There is an aspect of legal and regulation. Some of them are very well known by the pros, but some of them tend to be forgotten, and I'll cite examples later on. And the other aspect is not so much legal, is more human. We have a tendency to organize our services mainly for 100% valid people. There is a whole lot of people that are disabled, that are not easily mobile, and that represent a very high level of customer. And we've got, I'm not a specialist in this because I'm more a jurist, so I'll be talking to you about the legal side. But then as a special guest, we will have Jezza Williams that is specialized in this sort of issue, that will give a few hints, a few keys to adapt our services to disabled people, to enlarge and to broaden our audience. But first of all, let me talk to you about or remind you, because some of you may know this, about the legal and regulatory aspect. There are different levels. The first one is purely legal, is purely law. We are in the EU, and in the EU we've got a legislation with Natura 2000, we've got protected areas. So there is a whole set of legal issues that happen at EU level, and sometimes when a professional goes from one member state to the other, he may not remember that there is a higher level that regulates the same way as in his own member state. Of course, then we have national legislation that must not be forgotten, such as national parks or reserves, whatever you want to call them in your member state. There is people here from all over Europe. The third level is that sometimes is not known, is the local level. Some people think that if they follow the rules that are dictated by the EU or at national level, that's enough. There are specific rules. In every member state, there are specific rules that only touch one commune, one municipality. I was citing the example of Ardèche, of Verdon. The municipality has taken strict laws because there are so many people that, for instance, they forbid to camp at night, or they forbid to barbecue, or they forbid. If you are with a group of clients and you don't know these sort of rules, it makes it difficult to deliver your service. So before you deliver, and if you've been in the game for a long time, you know these sort of things. There is a lot of newcomers who don't necessarily know these sort of issues and forget that there is different levels of legislation. The second thing that may alter your service or that may change your way to deliver the service is the users. A lot of people see the rivers or the sea or the lakes as being open for kayaks, for rafts, for water activities, but they tend to forget that there are other users. I can cite a few examples. One of the key users is electricity providers. not in every river there is a dam above, but in many rivers there is a dam above. And I can assure you that in some rivers like Isère, for instance, where there are big dams, when they start launching water, you'd better not be there, or you'd better, if you've taken beginners, you know, thinking you're going to be on a level sort of WW2 river, you will end up in a WW4 river. That's going to be a different game. Of course, on flat rivers, whitewater 2 or nearly flat, there is no issue. But this is the sort of thing you need to keep in mind. There are fishermen, there are hikers, and depending on how you want to organize your trip, these must be taken into account. And of course, there is private owners. Private owners have got land. There is a lot of clients who are not used to the outdoors tend to think that it's an open space of freedom and that people can go anywhere they want. In some member states, you can go anywhere you want, but in most member states and around most rivers, the land is privately owned, which means that the owner may or may not accept that people just stop with their canoes to camp or to have barbecue or whatever picnic. So this is to be taken into account as well. Another level is another aspect of this regulation or access to nature that may be difficult or that may be challenged is the rating of rivers. I mentioned the whitewater levels that you all know from 1 to 5. We don't have much Zambezi in here in Europe, so the whitewater 5 is not so often. But there is an issue linked to the qualifications. If you have got a business in the service industry, you therefore employ kayakists or guides or whatever you want to call them in your country, in your member state. These people in most countries require certain qualification. And depending on how the river is classified by the local authorities, this may lead to the employment of one type of guides or another type. We have members, for instance, in Switzerland or in Holland, and we know because they work with us, and they go to France or to Italy or to different member states every year, and they don't take the same type of staff depending who they want to take with them and the rivers they want to use. So again, this is an aspect of things, especially in countries or member states that regulate the activity, because some member states do not regulate the activity, and so you can take practically any stuff you want onto any type of river. But for those who are regulated, you will need to make sure that the guy in front of the clients in the kayak or the canoe has got the right qualification, and it may depend also on the type of river. So as you can see, there is all sorts of issues that can affect your service. And of course, this leads to a problem of civil responsibility and insurance. And insurance in the EU for outdoor professionals may be a difficult thing. Some countries like Ireland, for instance, it's an extremely difficult issue because the compensations in case of accidents have been going very high and the premiums are very high. And we currently in Ireland see people in sea kayaking or in co-steering or in paddling or whatever who go simply out of business because they can't afford the insurance. So it's not so much a legal issue, but it's a consequence of all this legality that means that whichever way you go, insurance may be a problem. To give you an example, when you move from one member state to the other with your clients or with groups, insurance, the directive that regulates the recognition of qualification is making it compulsory not to provide your diploma to the local authorities, but to provide evidence of your insurance. That's compulsory because it's compulsory in many member states. So depending where you go, as soon as you start moving and crossing borders, you've got to be careful about this issue of insurance. And there is potentially a lot of consequences if you are not respecting this legislation. So as you can see, law, practitioners, people, private owners, insurance, etc. That's to people who've been in the trade for 40 years or 20 years, that's not an issue. But for newcomers, if you decide to subcontract some self-employed people, they may not be completely aware. I was on the phone 2 weeks ago with an Irish guy, and he's arriving in France. He wants to work in France. He wants us to help him declare and have his qualification recognized. And I said, yeah, no problem. Send me a copy of your civil responsibility insurance. And he looks at me and he says, I don't have a civil responsibility insurance. I said, well, how do you trade in Ireland? I trade. And you're not insured? No. Okay, he's 23, 24, 25. He doesn't know. And it is an issue. So sometimes you subcontract people, you subcontract guides or whatever when you deliver your services, and you think that this is all sorted. It's not, or it may not be. In any way, it's a thing that you need to tick on your agenda to make sure that it is. To conclude on this aspect, we as a trade, as professionals, we have a responsibility to make sure that these things are dealt with and respected, not only in our companies, but generally speaking, in the trade, in the sector. If we don't make sure that this is addressed, and there is a problem, some elected guy, some guy in the parliament, some guy in the ministry will take a decision on our behalf. If we don't create standards, if we don't address the issue and make sure that we are properly qualified, properly insured, properly, that we assess the risk, etc., someone will do it on our behalf. So access to nature, as you can see, is not a simple and evident issue. It has different facets that may make things complicated or at least needs to be addressed. And if we don't do it properly, someone else, a member of parliament or whatever, will do it for us. So keep that in mind. That's the issue I wanted to mention on the legal side, the regulated side. Now, of course, when you talk about access to nature, there is another aspect, and this other aspect is human. Is once you've sorted the legal side, who can access? Most of the time, we have reserved or concentrated on people who are 100% valid to jump into kayaks, into rafts, into stand-up paddles, and we tend to have forgotten about those who are disabled or who have got mobility problems. And so we have asked a chap called Jezza Williams, who's got, he's himself in a wheelchair. He broke his spine 3 or 4 years ago in Switzerland in a canyon accident because he was a guide, and he still is, and since then he's been in a wheelchair for now 3 or 4 years. And he's developed in New Zealand a whole set of equipment, systems, simple things to help people with disabilities access to nature, and in particular access to, because he's from the water activities, so access kayak and these sort of activities. So we've invited him a few days back. He couldn't fly to Lyon, so we invited him a few days back to a Zoom meeting and asked him the question, Jezza, you've got professionals in front of you at the paddle show. Could you give us a few hints, a few advices on how to address the issue of handicapped people in the outdoors? And this is what he recorded. This is a 10-minute presentation. I leave it to Jezza. Jezza, you are with us. You are with the paddle show.
Hello, everybody. It's Jezza here, coming to you all the way from New Zealand. Thank you for inviting me, Jean-Yves, to the Lyon Paddle Show. And so what I'd like to do over the next wee bit is give you an idea all about adaptive paddling. I'm Jezza Williams. I am the founder and CEO of Makingtrax, inclusive tourism experts in New Zealand. So, thank you everybody for tuning in today. Over the next few minutes, I'm just really wanting to explain to you how simple it is to provide an adaptive experience and how we do it. Safety and understanding, and of course, where to next. So make yourselves comfortable, get yourself a lovely drink, and let's get underway. So, The most important thing to understand with any activity that is an adaptive experience is it is extremely simple, as long as you treat it the simple way. Now, through many years of experience, Makingtrax has taught us that there is only a few things needed to make any adaptive sport possible. And the most important thing with this is the following: education, and that is to you, the industry; information, and that is to all of your clients. They need that appropriate information to confidently book or confidently partake in your activity. The next thing we need is cooperation, and that is between you, the industry, and your client. Adaption is our next little one, but the most important thing with adaption is to keep it safe, simple, and cost effective. And of course, promotion. We can make everything inclusive, but we cannot make it known unless we turn around and make it mainstream promoted, creating awareness of possibilities. So that is the simplicity, the basics of providing an adaptive experience. Now, the simplicity of an adaptive experience, and every ability is different, as is the environment. So it can be quite daunting to start with. But trust me, it's not. So the first thing we want to look at is having the appropriate information. What this does is it assists the client's understanding of your product. The more information you can provide to your client, the more they know whether or not that activity is suited to them. As every ability is different, as every environment is different, it's very important that we work together and marry the two together perfectly, making sure that everybody understands everybody else. The other thing is educated operators, and that is your job, to become educated, to understand your client. Because as I said before, every client is different, and everybody requires different needs, adaptions, or has different abilities or skills. But I find the most important thing to bring anybody into your business is communication, trust, and reassurance. What that means is everybody can adapt. So simple. Sort of blows your mind. A lot of people think of all the difficulties behind things, but it's not. It's the opposite. It's all about how possible things can be. So let's move along. We're going to be talking about a little bit of the difference of ways of thinking when it comes to an adaptive sport. Now, as we love to know, is we can make things very accessible, but it's important to understand the difference between accessibility versus inclusion. Now, most paddling activities are in wilderness areas, and they probably won't be accessible, but they will be inclusive. And I'll explain to you this in a minute. But the first things first, yes, there are many different ways to make an accessible entrance into a waterway. It's very important that you plan and you do it correctly. And it is also very important that a consultant is part of the decision making, so these mistakes don't happen. It's all about universal design. What that means is if you're building some adaptions, it's really important that it can be used by everybody. But the way we do it here in New Zealand, and the way that I believe the future of inclusion is about the possibilities. The cool thing is, it's now, it's simple, it's very cost effective, and it includes everybody. It's what we call advanced customer care. Now, in most water situations, you'll find that people are a team. We always work together. So you don't need very expensive infrastructure to provide an experience. What you need is information and to look outside the box. And there's so many different ways of achieving this. It could be basic transfers. It could be working with the client, understanding what the client needs. But the most important thing that I've got to keep pushing is every ability is different, as is the environment. So, firstly, we need to understand the environmental limits. When it comes to adaptive sports, especially water-based, it's always very conservative when it comes to weather, when it comes to water flows and temperature. But it's important to understand the clients in relation to the temperature, the weather, and the flows, as every ability is different. All adaptions that are needed must be releasable and safe. There's so many little things that need to come in, like include awareness of abrasion and pressure. If somebody's got spinal cord injuries, they don't understand that they may be scratching their bum every time they paddle. So it's very important that you use the correct equipment for the position. And it's also really important to be aware of your client. There's so many things that can affect your client, whether it's their temperature control, their ability to transfer, how strong they are, or how much they weigh if you're intending to give them a hand and you are going to transfer. So these are all things we really need to look at. But adaptions, they can be so simple and easy. We can start with the basic, and this is just this beautiful sup on our left. Amazing. The next thing is adaptions. Adaptions can be simple, safe, and cost effective. And this is really important to understand when it comes to adaption, is it doesn't have to be expensive. We all need an initiative to start down this path. So it's important to look outside the box. Don't look at expensive infrastructure. Look for basic adaptions. You can see 3 different adaptions here. In New Zealand, we make universal harnesses that fit on rafts, kayaks, sea kayaks, anything and everything. They're good on skin and they're fully releasable. In America, paddle adaptions are made that you can see in the middle that are very cost effective and easy. And then when it comes to things like supping, you can have a look on the right there. It's very simple adaptions. And as we go forth, you'll see these adaptions are simple. And the cool thing is about rafting and about kayaking is you've got a team around you. So there's many different ways of looking at the picture. As a team, it's quite simple to be able to move people, to get people transferred into boats, etc., etc., etc. So you need to look at that picture and understand that everything is simple and is possible. In New Zealand, what we do is we provide our companies with all the information that is required. Every ability, as I said, is different. So it's very important to understand your client. And this has got to do with the ability of their client, the strength of the client, and the weight of the client. And also being able to know that people are people, and it's important to treat them as such. Because as I say, The only thing all humans have in common is their diversity. And everybody has got different abilities. So it's really important to actually know that the only barrier is misinformation. So your job is to take the initiative. Where this goes is totally up to you. And this is the basic, the most simplest, easiest way to start down the path of adaption. I will tell you that we are now entering the phase where things are going to change. We're also hitting the International Rafting Federation is coming to the party, and we're starting to do international raft races, hopefully coming next summer. So I think you should take the initiative, get started, and start rocking and rolling. And as Makingtrax is the head of the International Adaptive Rafting Federation and IRF, it'll be my pleasure to help anybody out if they need to go down that adaptive path. Just stay in contact. For a photo of that, let me help you start your process of becoming an adaptive paddling company.
Thank you, Jezza, for these few hints and information on the way to help people accessing nature and water activities. But there is just one last question that I asked Jezza, and his answer is quite quick. But I asked him, I said, look, most of the professionals we are dealing with they're not volunteers, they've got businesses, and they've got to make sure that if they start investing, even if it's simple, if it's not necessarily super costly, if businesses start investing into addressing the issue of mobility and in the outdoors, and in particular in kayak or water activities, and if you consider that it's, after all, merely special needs for special guests, they are not guests that are completely different. They've just got special requirements. Is there a market? What is the market? And he has figures, and he answered, this is the answer he gave us about the EU, about the market in the EU. Who are these people?
Well, yeah, funny you should say that, Jean-Yves, because I'm sitting right on this page right now. So the potential client within the European, according to the World Health Organization, is that there's 5 million wheelchair users for a start, but there's about 139 million people living with a disability within the European Union. So it's quite substantial. And then if people tend to go on a trip or have a disability, then they'll go with their friends, with their families, with their associates. You know, you might as well double these numbers. So we are looking at quite a large number of clients. Of course, you won't get everybody, but the thing with accessibility and with inclusive or adaptive adventure is, once you start down this movement, then the more awareness comes and it starts to snowball effect. And what we've seen here in New Zealand is it's definitely starting that snowball effect to roll on. So the more we initiate, the more simple we make it, the more people know, the more awareness we have, then what's going to happen is more and more people are going to get out there and enjoy and partake. So it's a whole mega amount of clients out there waiting for Europe to open up their product to all these amazingly awesome people. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening to this little talk on adaptive waterways, paddling sports. And please, it'll be fantastic if you needed any more info, just get in contact with me. But boom, let's make Europe adaptable and inclusive. It's fantastic to talk to you all. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you, Jezza, for this statement and for his intervention. Thank you all. This is it for me today. That's a few info on the access to these water activities on the legal, the human side. Tomorrow I will be talking about Brexit with two guests. Brexit and the consequences over the trade in Europe. I will have two guests that will be virtual guests again. One, a lawyer specialized in social affairs in Brussels, and a French lawyer. He's actually based in Lyon, but we invited him virtually as well. So he will be. They will be giving us hints on. I will be dealing with the goods, and for services, I will be assisted by these two lawyers tomorrow. I'll see you at 11 o'clock in English, at 1 o'clock in French, and at 4 o'clock in English again tomorrow. Until then, enjoy the show, and see you tomorrow. Goodbye.